Um, I think Paolo's just coming. If we're all seated comfortably, I'll begin with this presentation I've just been working on the last couple of days. And just want to start with some appreciation for being able to share in this space. I think this is going to be really helpful for me to develop this thinking as well. Just to acknowledge that I'm speaking in English and this is quite heady. I thought I'd put the title in Spanish. Diseño y conceptos ecológicos. Ecological design and concepts. So this presentation is in two parts. Some of my own thoughts, distillation of principles, ecological principles for design, how we can begin to make our world more ecological and in service of life. There's this central question which I've been inquiring into in different spaces, which is how can we create life through our daily actions? Especially now we're living in a society that seems to be sucking in more life than it's generating. So the first part is just a few ecological principles for design, which I hope can bring some inspiration for people to look in this new way. And the second part of the talk is about ecological concepts, which show up in language. And we'll work through it. And then at the end, I've experimented with some worksheets where we'd like to collect some ideas and some inspirations, perhaps for this very building here, or places that any of you live or frequent. So we'll take some of these ideas and just share some thoughts, have a kind of creative jam together at the end. So there'll be a chance to express out. Please feel free to just stop me or ask if you have a question. I think that's fine. I begin with this Chinese proverb. When the winds of change blow, some people build walls, others build windmills. I think it's a beautiful Chinese proverb, and it's kind of self-evident what it's saying, and with the wind turbines in there as well. And I think this time that we live in now, the winds of change are blowing harder and faster than they have done before. So we can think that if walls are things, objects in separation, then windmills are processes of connection. So I hope this talk will inspire thoughts about how we create windmills and be windmill builders. Now, life creates better and better conditions for itself over time. That's what we mean by generative, or creating a regenerative culture, when we want our culture to regenerate. And so it's time for us to live in a way that creates life. Now, I'd just like to take just a short moment. If you close your eyes and imagine this planet in its primal state as a ball of molten rock, of magma cooling. This planet was once just a ball of rock, and now it's covered in life. And I always like to go back to this reflection from a cooling ball of rock to the abundance and green and humming and sound and vibrations that we're part of and we have all around us. This is amazing generation of life, creating more and more of itself over time. So how can we dance to this tune now? The ecological principles that I would like to start with, there's three. Now there's lots of frameworks out there, permaculture and biomimicry, which overlap with this. These are just three of my reflections. So embracing and slowing energy flows. One way that life is creating more life over time is that it's always embracing energy as it moves through the system. Energy comes in lots of forms, from water, heat, wind. We can think of other forms too. The second principle is cycling nutrient flows. So slowing and embracing or capturing energy, and cycling the flows of nutrients. And there's a distinction there in terms of design between energy and nutrients. Thinking of physics at the top, and then chemistry and biology is perhaps the cycling, more in this domain. In our built environment, in our constructed world, when we're cycling nutrient flows, we're eliminating waste. Waste is just nutrients that are not in flow, not in cycle with the system. So this is the elimination of waste. And we do that by allowing death and decay, these cyclical processes. And the third is multifunctionality. I had a term for this, stacking functions, which I talked to Chris about, he resonated with, but it's a kind of esoteric thing, building up more and more functions for whatever we're designing or creating. But really it's about being multifaceted. So I'm just going to go through these three principles with some illustrations. Multi-purpose, non-linear, multifaceted. So embracing and slowing energy flows. You see how natural systems tend towards this with the way that rivers move. The landscape embraces the flow of water, and we have the meandering of rivers. Water's not trying to make the fastest, the shortest distance from its precipitation to the sea. It's taking its time to move. And with the landscape embracing this energy flow, it creates the conditions for life to occur. Sediment builds on the banks. You think a straight line has less area than a wiggly line. So it's creating more space for life to thrive in. And as we adapt this thinking in ancient practices like terracing the landscape, this is slowing the flows of water, that form of energy, through the landscape. We see lots of terracing here in Ibiza, holding the soil and allowing the water to make its way slowly for life to thrive. Another way of embracing water energy is an example here of hydroelectric power, where we're using the flow and the energy of water to make power. This is a beautiful design for a generator, which you can see in the spiral. It's not like a hydroelectric dam, which is very linear and forced, collecting all the water and shooting it out. This is allowing water to turn. And in the way of allowing and creating the conditions for life, fish can move straight through this. They're not disrupted by this system when it's placed into a river. Water wheels, of course, we're familiar with. And harvesting dew. So these dew harvesting nets, there's some really big systems of this in Chile now, in Morocco, where the conditions are right to capture this water energy as it makes its way inland. So we're embracing this flow of water and allowing it to generate life. I seem to have someone following me.
It's okay. Bless him. It's fine.
Oh. Ejected.
To the curb.
Never RSVP'd. So, this is another way of collecting water along line with capturing or harvesting dew. This is somewhere in continental Europe, and I forget, but there's a great tradition of these stone houses that are dew condensers. And stones, maintain their temperature through the night, through the hot and cool cycles of the day, and so as water's in its hot state, it condenses around the cool stone and generates this water inside this tower.
Also, it's a very good sign when it lands in your head when you're doing the talk practice.
Ah, good. I feel blessed by it.
Yeah.
I remember hearing of some cairns, some stacks of stones that seemed like burial mounds. Again, I forget, somewhere in Eastern Europe around a community, an ancient community. And there was some puzzlement around what are these created for? They must be burial mounds. And people started to take them apart and thought, we'll destroy one to find out what's inside, because they're stacked up. There's nothing inside. And they found these channels at the center of these stone pyramids, which were dew collectors. And they were placed on the hills around this town, and every day they would create something like 1,000 litres of fresh water, purified from the air. Passive technology, requires little or no maintenance, maybe generational maintenance. So I like to think of these things as intergenerational infrastructure. This is building longer term thinking and timescales once we create these passive attractors for energy in the form of water in this case. This is a beautiful design for a dew harvesting system in Africa, and some of these designs are getting more and more popular now, and when I look at that I see both of them, they're both very sculptural. They actually start to bring out our creativity as well. When we're building things to last, we want them to look beautiful. So I used to work as a builder full time, and I was seeing some of these very ugly ways of moving things around and taking water off the roof. So we have like a downpipe. The water comes from the roof, it shoots down the downpipe, and we're speeding it up. So now we need to build a long drain and a big place to catch it, and it's still taking more and more energy. But if we allow it to slow the water, and we get creative, there's a beautiful design here with these cups. So the water falls from the roof and it goes from cup to cup to cup to cup. Or a beautiful column of some polished stones like this, something like this. So embracing and slowing energy flows is also bringing out our creativity. This is in Croatia. Actually, these steps that are an organ, they have hollow tubes inside, and as the waves lap against them, it plays music. So you can see people lying on these steps enjoying some music that's being played by the waves lapping. This is a house in Germany that has created a musical instrumentation out of their drain pipes. So when it's raining, the rain is celebrating and singing itself. I think this is beautiful. So with design, I don't mean to just say that, it's not just about the pragmatics of allowing life to occur. It's about us being alive and expressing ourselves creatively. And this is like tagged for the third principle, which I'll get to, but I just wanted to add it in, this piano staircase that plays a tune when you walk up it. And I realised actually it could be very annoying if you share a house with people or something, but I think it's I heard you coming back late last night, but it was really out of key, So heat as a bridge with water, geothermal power, I think needs not too much explanation, but it's so embracing the heat from the earth. And when we create some channels, we can allow water to fall down, heat up, turn a turbine or generate energy and do some work. And there's great passive technology as well for heating or cooling houses now by burying pipes in the ground. And depending on the climate, they will draw cool from the ground or draw heat from the ground. And once that system's there, it just allows that to happen in circulation. We don't need to run it on electricity or maintain it. Thermal springs, where we build swimming pools and places for leisure around this heat energy that's coming out, we're really embracing it too. I really love the circular design of these solar collectors, and I was unsure about putting this example in because it's also high concentration, which maybe doesn't feel so much in line with this allowing things to slow, but when we're working with solar energy, it's moving at a different pace. So collecting this energy from the sky and concentrating it to a point to boil water or make energy. We have these kind of solar thermal power plants. And of course, greenhouses, where we want to again embrace the thermal energy from the sun and hold it and allow plants to thrive that might not be able to grow in a climate otherwise.
Can I ask you, that power there?
This one here.
What does it actually do?
So there's a huge array of mirrors, parabolic mirrors, and they are all networked together. So the sunlight is hitting them and they're reflecting and channeling the sun's rays to this central point, which is almost like an artificial sun. I was talking to someone that had driven past this plant and said it was the most incredible thing to look at this terrestrial sun. They never experienced light on the earth in a concentrated point like the sunshine and the feeling from it. So this is an approach that I think will develop and find more uses.
To add on how it works.
Yeah.
Is it heats water at the top of that tower basically, correct?
Yeah.
That's the process, and that generates the electricity.
It's driving a turbine. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And wind needs no explanation, embracing wind. And I was thinking, okay, this third energy flow seems a bit short compared to the others. Oh, I wasn't prepared for the curtains to close. Tech support.
Sorry,
Slow closing.
Oh, you would think it was.
Oh, it's opening again.
Okay, we're going to have to. We might time out again before.
Okay.
So just share this video with you because I was struck by the beauty of this. I don't know if anyone's seen these sculptures before. Alex Howe, I think he's called, an American sculptor, has really learnt to embrace the energy of the wind.
That is insane.
It's just a short video we can enjoy for a moment. It makes me think of jellyfish or feather stars, these organisms. Something you could really get lost watching. And what beauty we can create when we work with the elements, when we embrace them, really embrace them.
So beautiful. They're very effective.
Yeah, so organic. He's a sculptor in the US, and he's commissioned sculptures around the world. Happy to share maybe after this talk, if we have a group, if there's some links or people wanting to follow up and look into some things more, I'd be very happy to share. This also reminded me, I didn't add it into the presentation, of Theo Jansen, this sculptor who created, it was one of the very, very popular early TED Talks. He created these beach animals, he called them, out of plastic tubes. Did anyone see these? They were incredible, like giant insects, and they would be moved like these sculptures by the wind, and they would make their way around the beach. And they could sense when they got to the water, and they would come.
They're beautiful.
They're so organic, right? Like an alien technology, they feel like.
Totally.
Oh. Okay, so the second principle is cycling nutrients and eliminating waste. And I put that on two sides because natural systems cycle nutrients and are in harmony with doing this. They couldn't do it another way. There's no waste in nature. Eliminating waste, I believe that the biosphere that cycles nutrients, when our technosphere, our technological layer of the planet, comes into its maturity, will also embody this cycling of nutrients. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Of course, learning from the master cycle, the great cycle of the seasons, where there is this period of falling away and reintegration, reuptake. So, biosphere cycles. When we're bringing this to our design and how we produce our food, we begin with the soils, and we grow our food, and we eat that food, and the food comes out as waste. And we do have a real taboo around our poo, our physical waste. And even to say that, feels quite funny, but we really struggle to talk about it. And something I find really sad is every time we eat some food, we flush those nutrients away as fast as possible in the most sterile environment we don't want to see, don't want to be anywhere near that. So at the center is some technology, some design, where we can actually really start to normalize this cycle and bring it home, bring it close to home. An anaerobic digester, which is like a stomach. It has bacteria inside it, no oxygen, and we can put any kind of food waste in there. If you've cooked even animal food, meat or fish, or a lot of cooked things we can't put into a composter, but the anaerobic digester, like our own stomachs, will break them down with its own microbiome. And what comes out is gas, which we can loop back into the process to cook our food. So we're starting to build these cycles. And the other thing that comes out is an incredibly rich fertilizer, which we can put back into the soil to enrich that soil to grow better food. So when we start to fold these cyclings of nutrients round, this is this abundance that turns a ball of rock into the thriving planet that we live on. In the technosphere, how this might look, and a technology I believe is part of our maturity and coming of age, is 3D printing. So this is a machine that's just can grind plastic. You have a waste bottle and you throw it in and it grinds it into particles, into pellets. Then something like this, an extruder. We can pour these ground plastics into the extruder and it spits out a thread, a plastic thread, ready to be spun again by a 3D printer into a new object. I just found for a convenient colour there, but obviously, you know, the range of things that can be 3D printed is kind of unlimited. And looking at plastic, but this is also for any other synthetic materials. When we start to design with this cycle in mind, I think this is really beautiful. This makes me excited about our future and hopeful for it, that we can cycle these nutrients. Now I've made this thing and it breaks. No problem. Back into the machine. Actually today I want to make something else. You know? And when this is renewably powered by these natural energy flows, then we're not taking from the biosphere, we're dancing with it, and we're generating in the technosphere. And then we look around and we think the raw materials for these kinds of processes are abundant. When we begin to see our landfills, our rubbish dumps, our waste as untapped nutrients that are just not in cycle. We were talking the other day, and Astrid was speaking and just had a beautiful conception of we were talking about inner work and monsters, and Astrid, you had a beautiful definition of monster which stuck with me, that something when it's outside you is bigger than you, and that's kind of the meaning of monster. And so it's hard to get involved with that. And it adapted in my mind to this kind of process, the monsters of our landfills, of our mountains of rubbish. These are the monsters today that outwardly we need to embrace and integrate and bring into flow and into cycling.
And then they become small.
And then they become small,
Yeah.
these little things, and they become part of a process of enrichment. So I thought it was I was trying to think of these parallels between the personal and the global work. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation is just one that I know of that does incredible work designing circular economies, design and consultancy agency working all over the world, and there are so many now doing this work, but it was just to show a map of the technosphere and the biosphere both being brought into this cycling of nutrient flows. So the third ecological principle is multifunctionality. I liked this term stacked functions, but I think it's esoteric. Multifunction is quite regular to understand. And so looking to a tree, if we take an ecological organism or an ecological process like a tree, we try not to make a tree a thing. It's something in motion. And maybe any ideas, shout out things that trees do. Any thoughts? Breathe. That's good, yeah. Shelter from the sun, that's right. They breathe oxygen. Inhale carbon dioxide.
There's lots of animals living on them.
Yeah, habitats for a tree. Home. Yeah.
Good listeners.
Fruits. Good listeners. I have this in there too, I'm glad you said that.
Fertile soil.
Fertile soil, exactly. They hold the ground together. They're embracing the ground. Wisdom.
Huggers.
Huggers. I have to now add to this list after this presentation, I think. So yeah, they store water, they make the rain, they produce sap, they're windbreaks, they're soil stabilizers, solar energy collectors, sunshades, megacities for bacteria, fruit and nut creators, wisdom keepers. They hold knowledge of the surrounding ecosystem, which they help to regulate and take care of.
In Chile, the mapuches, the araucarias, they live for 2,000 years, the trees. And then they have the ceremony where they, the trees that fall, the branches that are inside the tree that fell, and there's a lot of snow, becomes this very hard, they call it the mapuche gold, the ambar. And the original meditation, when you found one of those, you put it in your heart, and so your ancestors that lived when those trees were up and about, and they walked through the trees, the memory of them would speak to you through that part of the tree.
That's beautiful.
So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. It makes me think of this intergenerational wisdom keeping and a cycling of nutrients of another kind, not just molecules, things we can touch or label, but this wisdom of our ancestors. So, multi-functions in design. There's this hotel in Norway, the Smart Hotel, which is purported to be the world's first energy positive hotel. Wow. It's not just a hotel, it's a power station too, so it's creating more energy than it's consuming. And I like this as a principle, just looking at energy. We build a net positive building. This is why I don't use the term sustainability. You know, so I'm going to talk about sustainability. We don't want to sustain things. Life doesn't sustain. This would still be a cold ball of rock or a warm ball of rock. But about generation. And so net positive is a term that I use to interface with financial mindsets, because that's still our predominant valuation system, but creating net positive approaches, things that are generative, generating abundance. And the Tesla roof tile is part of this construction where you don't, it seems crazy to me as a builder, we build a roof and then we build solar panels on top of the roof instead of building a roof that's a solar panel. This is the sustainability base in the States, built by the guys that wrote Cradle to Cradle. They wrote the Upcycle. They're very much about the new paradigm of sustainability, and this building produces more water and energy than it consumes. They were commissioned to design a tranquility base on the moon. Unfortunately, they had enough clout to say, we thought about the proposal and we're not going to build something on the moon. We're going to build something on the Earth that's generative for life. Otherwise, why are we going there? If we can't do that here, you think we can create an environment that will sustain on the moon? So I really love that they created this. Michael Braunhart said, about sustainability, if you're asked, someone asks you about your relationship, friend, lover, and you say, it's sustainable. Like, you're not pleased for them, right? That's not something we should be aiming for, you know? Relationship sustainable, is that the relationship we want with the biosphere? I don't think so. Again, with water flows, this is just another example of how we add functionality to what's already going on, what's already occurring and moving. We have dams of reservoirs, we turn the tap on, take it for granted that water flows out. And it's always a reminder to me to think, every time I'm turning the tap on, there's a huge process going back up the chain. Storage of water, energy, gates opening and closing, allowing all of this flow to happen. And we're putting a lot of energy through our systems, but we're not recapturing it. We're not building smaller loops and cycles inside. So Portland, Oregon, the city council there have been building these municipal water pipes. These are like 1.5 meter diameter pipes with turbines inside them. So everyone's using water and it's flowing through the city. Now that water is also generating electricity, bringing down the cost, the energetic and environmental cost. So I like this, spotting places where energy flows are occurring and then capturing more, recapturing from them. Again, like I was saying, with solar panels and roofs, or having roads everywhere that just have this one function, there's been these inspirations to make solar powering roads. And it's kind of good to share this one actually, because the solar roads that have been built have been a disaster. But it's the right approach, I feel, to start doing. Just imagine if we had no power stations, but our roads were our power station and our channels of transportation. This is the kind of multi-function functionality we see in natural systems, and it's bringing our inspiration and creativity out. This is applying sort of multifunction to more to social design. This little example I have of this crow dropping a coin into a box. There's a system called a Skinner box, right, where if the simple version, this animal psychologist Skinner created a system where you have a panel, and if a pigeon pecks that panel, it drops some food, some grain, and the other panels don't. And it learns to peck that panel and reward itself. It's a simple system of reward. Now this guy was talking to someone at a party, and he was a farmer or a landowner, and saying he has a problem with crows because he's made a monocrop. So that's invited lots of animals to come and eat that crop, and he's trying to fight them off. And saying he couldn't think of a way to get rid of crows because they're so intelligent. Anything he tries, they learn very fast and they get around it, learn how to open the grain store. You can't keep them out, okay? This is the wrong relationship. So this guy thought, how can we have a positive relationship with these pests, so-called? So he created a Skinner box where there was a tray of coins and peanuts. And this crow would come down and eat all the nuts until there's just coins left. But while it's doing it, it accidentally knocked some coins into a slot on this tray. And more nuts come out somewhere else. So Then it knocks all the coins in and eats all the nuts. Now there's no more coins. And the crow remembers where it saw a coin on the street. So flies off and gets the coin, comes back. So now crows are collecting lost change. Something like $500,000 of loose change in US cities every year. Something like that. That's a bit of a guess figure, but it's like in those realms. So now you assign a charity to this box.
Oh my God.
Education, permaculture schemes, anti-racism, whatever. And now crows are living in and working with us, and we're dancing with them. And we've created this net positive relationship, this beneficial relationship. So I thought that was a beautiful idea. And he did a TED talk, and I've tried to find the scheme. And it's turned into a bit of an open source culture around creating the most imaginative Skinner boxes for crows. So they're collecting all kinds of things and rewarding themselves in interesting ways. And there's a funny little subculture of techies that are like, what else could we do together with these amazing creatures? These are just a couple of simple examples where we've seen this, with our plastic waste. Again, if we had somewhere better to put the waste, like in the 3D printing example, people going out to exercise, like Tim when we went to Bali, his first little post was he went to the beach, saw rubbish everywhere and spent the day picking up rubbish. And people doing this all over the place now. So we have more, we're adding collecting waste or now nutrients to our exercise routine. So it's like a multifunction thing. There's a organisation in the UK called Good Gym, which is excellent, where if you have a running route that goes past a elderly person's house and they can't go to the shop to collect their groceries, you're running right past the shop and their house and they're stuck at home. So now Good Gym are pairing people up with care in the community or a whole team of people want to go running at the weekend, but actually someone needs a garden digging over. So it's like we can come and do that as a group exercise thing. So I think it's really beautiful when we start to build these multi-purposes to things that we're doing anyway.
Yes, and it's contagious. I have a friend that created a group where we're walking,
Mm-hmm.
and so she put in the WhatsApp group, I'm walking and cleaning, who wants to come? When we said, who wants to come walking? 2 people came.
Yeah.
We said, who wants to come walking and cleaning?
Yeah.
It was like 15 people, and we cleaned like 3 kilometers.
Amazing, right? So it's so
So
motivating.
people are really motivated.
It's bringing another purpose. But we know deep down we're participating in a greater cycling of nutrients.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's where we're heading, and that's okay. It's interesting. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, you think it only go to sleep if it didn't. Oh, here we go. Happening again.
We're going to get the nice curtain opening transition again. So that's really the first 3 ecological principles. And there's so many ways to think of ecological principles and lots of really great frameworks out there, much longer traditions, but these are just 3 that have come to me. I'm going to show a little bit on how we apply them in a moment.
A question.
Yes, please.
Are you working with this somehow? Here, like,
Yeah, I'm hoping to, yeah.
Yeah.
And part of the contribution I feel I can make here is with some of this thinking and some of this design.
yeah.
We're going to just try a little exercise together at the end of this, and we'd like to collect some inspirations which might help feed ideas into this place, this beautiful temple.
Do you want to share? I think to answer back the question, I think maybe you want to say something about pale blue.
Yeah, no, I'll come. Thank you, Pat. Yeah, I'll come to that at the end. But this is what I'm doing professionally and developing my own consultancy called Pale Blue, which is a reference to the pale blue dot, seeing the Earth from space. A beautiful speech by Carl Sagan when he turned the Voyager probe round. I really recommend the speech. Maybe you can share afterwards. Everyone that's ever existed. Never was there a picture that so well demonstrates the folly of human conceits than this pale blue dot. I love this phrase. The folly of our bickering, of our combative little relationships on this pixel. It just seems so funny when you zoom out. So pale blue is seeing the whole and the parts, and crucially how they interact. And I'm working to bring this perspective to different domains through language and through design. And I'm still sort of developing this service design and kind of here on a amateur incubator period now. So I'm so grateful to have this space and this forum to share.
Yeah, it's all amazing stuff.
Thank you. I've done some explorations in London with the Tate and the Design Museum. Actually, this next piece was a workshop at the Tate, where I started to develop these ideas. How can we engage people with adding functions to human objects for other forms of life, other life processes? So we take a human object and we add a function for nature, and then we create an ecological attractor, something that's attracting life. So that's the formula. So I learned of this historical example where you have paving stones in a city, and animals are always looking for somewhere that's holding water so they can get a drink. Now the Ottomans used to carve every maybe 1,000th cobblestone or 100th cobblestone, somewhere that was always in shade, and they would carve out a dish so that it would catch rainwater, so there would always be somewhere for animals, birds and animals to drink from. I think it's just such a beautiful philosophy that they built this into how they lived, right? Our paving's not just for us, we're sharing this space. We should share it with love. So this always sticks with me. I need to get someone to do an example, like a post box and a bird bath. You think like a post box is just for collecting letters, but it could have so many other functions on it. It could be a bug hotel, it could be a bird bath, it could be a home for creatures. I love the idea that you could go and post and pick some berries, or or feed an animal. And as we start to build this functionality, it always feels tragic and heartbreaking when I see high-rises and people not having access to a garden. Maybe they can go out to a city park. And then when we really start to bring these needs and designs together, see these really beautiful emerging buildings now, living high-rises. So that concludes the first part of the talk, these 3 ecological design principles. I'll summarize them just at the end. Now I have a shorter section on ecological concepts and how they show up in language. So if we have the patience to go through this second part, I'll just go straight through. And then we can have a break and do this exercise. There's a field called ecolinguistics, which is from ecological philosophy, looking at language. And I've been taking inspirations from this field and starting to develop something I think of as language of connection. And since I started to look at it, I noticed more and more how we turn the world into things. Like at the beginning of the talk, I said walls are things and windmills are processes. So how we say that in language is a thing is a noun and a process is a verb. The great Buckminster Fuller understood this so well. And he said, "I live on earth at present, and I don't know what I am. I know that I am not a category. I am not a thing, a noun. I seem to be a verb, an evolutionary process, an integral function of the universe." I think it's really beautiful. When I first read some Buckminster Fuller and I noticed how he was using language in this way, he wouldn't say humans in the universe. It's humans in universe, in the process of universe. And when we turn in fact this talk, I worked on it the last couple of days to develop it a bit further, but the first and only time I gave a lecture was in Norway, where I was lucky enough to be in Sami territory in Kautokeino in Finnmark, and there's a university for the Sami people there, for people of that particular region. And I was talking to a scholar there, and she said, she stopped me and she said, "I don't like it when you say the wind is blowing. What is the wind that's doing the blowing?" They have a description for blowing with different seasonal modifiers for different kinds of blowing. When they talk about reindeer, they're not talking about the reindeer, the nouns. They talk about reindeer as a flow over the landscape. And reindeer is a flow that moves in different ways, in different seasons, and in different landscapes. And there's a very interesting tension because they're being forced, in a sense, to write their language down, which is a spoken, an oral language, which is all moving. It has very few or little number of nouns in, so that they can capture this knowledge and so they can interface with Norwegian, with European, with English, and defend their lifestyle and their way of life. But as part of that process, they're changing their language. They're locking it into written word. And that's a very difficult tension. That was a bit of an aside. Now, I just found this funny cube on my desktop, and I just put this here because the next things I'm going to say about language, I don't mean to say that it's always right to use ecological words or verbs instead of nouns. You know, there's appropriate context, of course, and language is so slippery. So I hope these just come as inspirations, but not as right and wrong. Build or grow. I think pertinent maybe even to where we are and what a lot of us are involved in is often hear of building a community. This came up on a project in France. We were sat around visioning this community that was going to be built at the chateau. And I challenged this friend of mine to say, well, I don't know if building is the right process for community. And he said, build, grow, whatever. And I thought, well, actually, it's not whatever. Because under the words are great concepts. And those concepts inform how we expect the community to behave. If a community is a building, it's made of parts. And when it's built, it's done. If a community is grown, it goes through seasons and cycles. What will the autumn of this community be? What happens in its spring? What's the soil that it's growing in? And actually that project really never took off for lots of different reasons, but I believe that the concepts were very much part of that. Because if we were looking at growing a community in France, it wasn't about importing the right bricks or people from London to, you know, we need a COO and we need blah, blah, blah. It's like, what's the soil here? What's this region of France, this bioregion? What's in its seed bank? What are the people of the seed bank of this community? And what do they need to grow?
I love that.
So build and grow is a really common one. So I'm just going to give 3 forms of ecological concept. Build and grow is the process concept. Are we looking for processes or things? Now, organism and mechanism are at the heart of those. And I have this phrase that I'm always hunting for machine think, where we're thinking things into machines, into parts, and trying to transform that machine think so things are in connective process. So they're like windmills, not like walls, to go back to the first analogy. Another kind of ecological concept area is relationship in space. And I had a great conversation with my nephew about living on the planet and suggesting, what if we say we live in the planet? And when we see the world through the machine lens, we see surfaces and objects. I'm standing on the ground, on the earth. That's right, that's fair. But when we're thinking holistically about the planet as an organism, we're in her atmosphere. We're in the world. We're part of it in that way. So now my nephew, who's 10, is radically policing people's language and testing them. Where do you live? And he's carrying this. I have a lot of inspirations from him. He's also talking about, Uncle Tom, I always hear people saying that they're on top of their problems. Do you think that's right? And I was like, yeah, maybe getting into your problems, that's a different thing, you know? We get into a good book. And so if we want to get into and transform the monsters, the things that are not in flow, I think being on them, it carries this feeling of domination, of being on top, suppressing, perhaps. Now, the third, and this is the kind of last bit of the talk and the sort of the most abstract, I came to understand with this study of ecolinguistics, that there's our cognition, how our cognition works with language. It's very difficult in the climate space, in the environmental space, because we have these terms like climate that we never feel directly, but we do experience the weather. So they are of a different order, weather and climate. And we're always trying to do stuff with the climate, but it's very hard for people to get motivated because a concept like climate is happening in the forebrain. It's not an embodied concept because we don't have a direct experience. So we can't feel the climate changing. No one's feeling climate change. No one's really feeling the environment, First of all, we turn it into a noun, the environment. We never say this environment, so we're all in it. And but we experience certain environments: woodland, beach, mountains. And that's hard because when we're talking about the whole world, it's difficult to be specific, right? We're talking about the whole climate, not individual bits of weather. So there's a real difficulty in climate work to get people to feel what's happening. Now, I just use the example of furniture and chair because furniture is a category. If I say to you furniture, that's happening in the front of your head. You know what furniture is? It contains all these kinds of things. And if I say to you chair, that's an embodied concept. Some of you are sitting on chairs now or sitting. When you're processing the concept of chair, parts of your motor cortex, the part of your brain that coordinates your body starts to light up, and it simulates typical interactions with chairs, sitting down, moving them, lifting, things like this. So you're having an embodied understanding of chair but not of furniture. So this is a problem with extinction, for instance. And I'm developing a creative practice that I call Mind and Replace. And it's using the Find and Replace tool. So you can take an article with a concept that's not being felt, like climate, for instance, and just replace it with another concept all the way through that document. And I've created some quite weird short articles from Wikipedia. One's called Tree Scrapers, where I used the build and grow and changed all the instances of build and building to grow and growing. And it describes the 1846 Growing Act, which says that no houses shall be grown over 40 stories high. And it paints this picture of like a very rich and green world. So I really felt it with extinction and just allowed myself to be provocative, and I've highlighted the words which I've changed from the first paragraph to the second. In Wikipedia there's an entry which describes the 6th mass extinction. As far as we know, we live right now in the 6th greatest extinction phase that this planet's ever seen. Species are dying out 10,000 times faster than they naturally go extinct. And reading this article, and a lot of the language feels quite dead. It's not happening in my body. Like this should be helping me process the grief of loss, reading about extinction. And I'm not connecting with it. So I'll just read the first passage and the second. The Holocene extinction, otherwise referred to as the 6th mass extinction or Anthropocene extinction, is an ongoing extinction event of species and is one of the most significant extinction events in the history of the Earth. This ongoing reduction of biodiversity coincides with the present Holocene epoch as a result of human activity. If that makes anyone feel particularly sad or moved, when we contemplate it, it's like it's radical. So I do this find and replace, and I switch extinction with emptying, biodiversity with beauty, or ongoing with right now. And it reads, the Holocene emptying, otherwise referred to as the 6th mass emptying, or human-caused emptying, is a right now event.